Lonnie Zamora was going about his business, and his business as a policeman was to, in this case, look after people speeding.
Scaro 2 to Scaro. I'm heading out to the old rodeo grounds in a 510, late model Fury.
Roger, Scaro 2.
You're mine now, boy.
Zamora hears a blast in the distance, so he breaks off the chase of the speeder.
What the hell?
Zamora saw a very bright light. He thought it was a flame, possibly, and it was so unusual and so low that he figured he had to investigate it as a police officer. Was this a plane, possibly, that was having problems? What was this?
Scaro 2 to Socorro. Nip, we got some kind of explosion southwest of 60 off Canyon Road. I'm gonna check it out.
10-4, Scaro 2. Over.
He's looking down at what he describes as an egg-shaped object sitting on 4 legs. He's not really sure what it is.
But what Zamora sees next is even stranger.
He sees these 2 beings.
What happens to many witnesses when they first see something unusual is that they go through what we often call the escalation of hypotheses. And they absolutely start with the reality. With Zamora, it might have been, I'm seeing a secret test vehicle from the nearby White Sands missile range.
Officer Zamora decides to investigate. But the 2 small figures seem to have disappeared.
He figured that they had gotten into a hatch, a door, and had closed it, and that was the thumping sound he heard. He just figured, I have to go investigate this.
Zamora moves towards the craft. He's now only 20 meters away, and he still can't figure out what he's looking at.
Zamora was uncertain about what he was seeing, but he was a police officer. And so he kept approaching the object.
He sees a symbol on the craft, sort of a umbrella-shaped or an arch with an arrow underneath it and a line beneath it in red.
This is like no sign he's ever seen from White Sands or anywhere else.
It didn't say U.S. Air Force. It didn't say NASA or U.S. Army or it didn't say anything like that.
To my knowledge, it doesn't resemble any known alphabet, hieroglyphics, or anything like that. That he sees a flame coming out of the bottom, a bluish glow from the bottom. He's freaked out. He doesn't know whether it's going to explode. He doesn't know what it's going to do.
He turned around and ran, and I can't blame him. He dropped his glasses and therefore couldn't see as well naturally as the object was beginning to go away. Skeptics have used this point to say that, well, you know, it possibly was a test vehicle because he couldn't really see how it was going away. His vision was good enough to see generally that the object was traveling low across country. The roaring sound stopping is critical because if it's a terrestrial vehicle, to stay up in Earth's atmosphere, it has to keep roaring. Jet engines, rockets, planes, everything keeps the engine running as it goes across country. This object didn't do that.
It had legs. It was like struts coming down, and this is where one of them was, and another one's over there.
You know, there were 4 marks on the ground, and he said there were landing pads, and yes, there's 4 marks that could have been landing pads, and they're in deep enough that it would have taken an object of some size to do that.
See this thing?
The men find a slab of what looks like fused sand. Sand that's been heated at such a high temperature that it's become like glass.
Zamora, what's that?
They also find footprints.
These footprints had an odd geometrical pattern and were smaller than a normal footprint would be.
There were people here, except they weren't people. I don't know what they were. I couldn't see their faces at all.
Socorro is a case that is so unique that it almost deserves its own classification. It is a case where a creature was sighted by a very reputable witness who was in the daylight, very near the object that these 2 humanoids were standing next to. And so it's very hard to deny. In fact, even skeptics will not deny that Officer Zamora saw something and that what he saw was probably what he said he saw.
The incident is extensively investigated by the state police, the Air Force, and dozens of journalists. Gas station owner Opal Grinder reports that a customer buying gas near the sighting complained of a low-flying object almost hitting his car. The Air Force announces that no aircrafts from White Sands Missile Range were involved. An engineer from Northwestern University analyzes the landing marks and determines that they are consistent with a craft of the weight and shape that Lonnie Zamora described. All other investigations by the Air Force involving unknown humanoid beings have been dismissed due to the unreliability of the witnesses. Zamora's sighting remains the only one that has not been rejected.
And I saw this white-looking object. It was sort of a big egg shape, bigger than a car. Those are the exact bushes that were there, and the craft was sitting right in between them two. So I started down to see what it was, and then I heard this big boom in the bottom, and fire came off the bottom. So I started running behind my police car to take cover. I could feel the heat off that because it was windy like now, and then it gradually pulled up about 20, 30 feet and stayed there for a while, and then just took off. We came down here, and we saw this big rock right down here. It was still on fire. And then we saw the imprints of the legs of the craft, and it was 4 of them. And then we saw this footprints are on here. They went down there and measured the footprints and everything. And we stayed out here till about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, still wondering what it was. But they didn't say what it was or not. According to the Air Force and government, they say they don't know what it was, and they never told me not to say or say about it, talk about it. But they say that they don't know what it was. This road about a half a mile, and then I stopped my car and I got out and looked out, and I could see a white looking object in the distance. I thought it was an overturned car at first, but I got into my patrol car and went up closer to it. And when I started to get out of the car, I heard a big roar. As I got to it, I could see looked like a couple of coveralls hanging from a clothesline. I couldn't see what it was, but it looked like a couple of coveralls.